Hello, guys, and welcome to the Round Peg Square Holes podcast. I'm joined today by Rob Moore. So we're streaming on Rob's pages and, of course, our F10X Academy group. The subject of the talk today will be how to build an online global business with little to no overhead. Rob, I met a few years ago. Rob is an entrepreneur and investor, author of 6 Amazon bestsellers, prolific podcaster, 2-time public speaking world record holder, and founder of the Rob Moore Foundation. Rob, great to have you here, mate.
Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you for having me on your show.
For anyone in Dubai who hasn't, they've probably read your books, but if they haven't met you or listened to some of your podcasts, could you give us a little bit of a background on who Rob Moore is?
Sure. So I'm an entrepreneur. I started my first business, I suppose, with my dad when I was 6, because he got me bottling up in the pub and counting the coins in the fruit machines and the pool tables. It got me checking the take from the night before and got me doing the maths really early. I could always count really quick in my head, even at sort of age 6. And my dad was very much an entrepreneur. Pubs, clubs, hotels. Made a lot, lost a lot, made a lot, lost a lot, as many entrepreneurs do. But then I kind of got stuck in the school system. Nothing wrong with the school system. It just wasn't for me. I don't think it cultivates entrepreneurs as much as it does people who might be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, an accountant. But that's just not me. That's just not who I am. What is it you say? Square pegs, round holes. I was a square peg in the round hole of the schooling system. But when I was aged 25 years and 11 months, my life had got away from me. I got myself into a lot of debt, about 50 grand sterling. I was just working in my dad's pub, just getting by and making ends meet. I wasn't doing anything that excited me or made me feel alive. And that was probably 7 or 8 years in the making of that. And my dad had a massive nervous breakdown in his pub. He had 1 o'clock on a Sunday lunchtime, the busiest day of the hour of the week. And he just completely lost it and got quite aggressive, and it was like he was possessed. And I managed to get him out the front of the pub, but 2 police vans pulled up. All the customers were watching. My mum and my sister were out on the front lawn. It was freezing in December. And they beat him up and beat him to, well, you could argue they were defending themselves. I thought they were quite aggressive, but he was sectioned. And he was diagnosed with bipolar. And I was 1 month away from being 26. And I sort of saw in that moment and the week after of self-reflection and beating myself up and self-loathing that actually I was wasting my life. I had this entrepreneurial spirit within me that my dad had instilled in me, but I'd just let go of my life and taken the wrong path, if you like. So I woke up. And from then on, I got into property with my business partner. We now have 750, 800 properties that we own, co-own and manage. We're developing about 150 units right now with another 60. So that'll be 210 rental units that we'll have come onto the market next year. I became a millionaire before the age of 31. So that was within 4 years of being 50 grand in debt. I've now written 18 books with 3 I'm in the process of writing. Like you said, I got 2 world records for longest public speeches. I have the UK's largest property training company, Progressive Property. My podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, is one of the top listened to podcasts in the UK in business. My social media following's pretty prolific. I probably put 3 pieces of content out per day per platform. I'm probably interviewed on shows like yours maybe 10, 15 times a week on average. I'm a dad of 2 kids. I can fly the helicopter, although a bit rusty at the moment. And I just love business. I love entrepreneurship. I love mentoring people. I love hanging around with really successful people. I love figuring out meaningful problems in the world and then turning that into an opportunity. And it's a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's great to have you here. And you may be on 14 shows like this, but you'll only be on this one, once. So,
well, you might have me back if it goes well.
Oh, maybe. Well, it depends how it goes. We'll talk afterwards. So, I mean, you mentioned your personal story. It was obviously, a touching personal story. When you look back at your personal story and what you saw your dad as a business owner go through, how much did that influence the way in which you ran your business, and how much did it influence the kind of decisions you make in the way you structure your business? I'm curious about that.
I don't think what happened to my dad really affects how I run my business or the strategies and tactics in business. Because actually my dad was of the work really hard, do everything yourself, don't rely on staff, don't rely on others. He was the sort of the old school, because he's 76 now, the old school Northern English way. Whereas my business philosophy is very different. I want to build a big team. I love outsourcing and leveraging. I love having people around me who are better than me at their jobs, and sometimes even my jobs. I want a global scale, not local restriction. So strategically, as an entrepreneur, I almost do the opposite to my dad. But what influences me still to this day and always will is the emotional and the motivation to be a successful person and a good son. That I think about that on nearly a daily basis. There's been quite a lot of news, hasn't there, this week, of people who've passed away. Maradona at 60, Baba Diop, a footballer, at 42. Well, I'm 41 and my dad's 76. So I would say every day I try and breathe in the gratitude that I still have my dad here, and, use my life and to motivate myself to do good in the world and raise a lot of money for my foundation, and make sure I get to the end of every day and think, was I valuable? Did I help people? Did I serve my staff? Did I serve my community? Did I do the best I could? Did I waste any time? One of the great gifts of what happened to my dad and then getting into property was it really motivated me to want to be a successful person. And I think if you're a successful person, you can make good money along the way. And I bought my dad a brand new Mercedes. I gave him a house. I took him up in the helicopter on his 65th birthday. He wanted to be a pilot. He didn't quite make the grade. And I'll treasure those moments forever, like way more than my first million or my 5th million or my 10th million or whatever. So, but strategically as an entrepreneur, I do the opposite to my dad because I'm a different generation. Yeah. But one of the reasons my dad got bipolar is because he worked so fucking hard and he put himself almost dug his own grave of how hard he worked.
Yeah. And so maybe the influence that kind of moment gave you was avoiding going through that yourself, and even that means building a team, outsourcing, and doing things in a very different way, right?
Yeah. Well, I know you're quite inspired by Steve Jobs and his story. Well, actually, he got a lot of his best ideas on long walks, and he would have meetings on long walks, and that's not hard work, hustle, graft, 10x like a lot of the pervasive advices on social media. Is taking time, thinking, discussing, debating, hypothesizing, getting out there in nature, being inspired by all the things that are around you, rather than just like, a dog, head down, arse up, digging. And, how I was raised and how many people are raised is you dig, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years, and then you might be an overnight success. But yeah. I'm not saying I haven't worked hard, and I'm not saying I don't work hard, but I work hard in short, sharp bursts. And I take time to do many interviews like this, to talk to a lot of people, to have phone conversations, to have long walks, to be bored, to be inspired by art, by music, by culture, by shows on Netflix. Get a really holistic inspiration around me and not be in too much of a rush, which I am always in a fucking rush. Too many parking fines. But it's symptomatic of needing to be busy to feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I think we've got to do the opposite of that.
I completely relate to that. I mean, I often find the moments I slow down and kind of pause, as tricky as I find that, because I'm like you in the way that I want to do so much at the same time and I'm busy all the time. But the moments I pause, that's when the most creativity happens, the best ideas come out. It's when you have more visionary mindset. Completely relate to that. Really, really interesting. So listening to what you said about what you do now in your business and progressive property, it started off as a very kind of physical bricks and mortar kind of business, didn't it? You know, with rentals and buying properties and I mean, at what point did you transition from that to doing kind of online businesses or making that the priority?
Yeah, so I've kind of gone from local to county to national to intercontinental and now to global. And parts of my business model are scalable globally and parts are only scale locally. So the bricks and mortar element, the properties that we own and manage and rent out and develop and convert, that's a very local business. And I couldn't go and build a big building in Dubai. I couldn't because I haven't got the team there. I'm not there. It's 8 hours away. It's 5 hours time difference. You know, I don't know the rules, the regulations, the laws, the planning. It's all completely different. And so people with property, they make the mistake of not being local. But that's not scalable globally. But what is information, training, education, mentoring. So I'm very local with bricks and mortar, but how we scaled nationally and globally was with our training companies. So Progressive Property, Progressive Success, my podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, my books, you can see some of them behind me. This is what helped to scale globally, leveraging the internet, leveraging social media, leveraging online, leveraging information, which has no overhead, very low fixed costs. You don't need premises, you don't need stock, you don't need necessarily staff for information. But right now, people are craving good information in a very distracted information overload society that we're in. So good quality information, people will pay a premium for that. So that's how I scaled globally.
Really, really interesting. So I mean, this is all in the span of how many years from local to kind of global? How long did that take?
Well, I didn't even focus on global. I was so focused on building a property portfolio with myself and my business partner. So from probably 2006, which is when we started buying properties, 20 in our first year, 30 in our second, 50 in our third, give or take, for ourselves and others. For those first 3 years, we were just thinking locally. We probably went nationally within probably 3 to 5 years when we started running seminars in the UK. And of course, London is where everyone comes. We'd be doing seminars in London, but then we do Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool, Glasgow, Edinburgh. So maybe within, let's say, 5 years, we were national. And then, of course, you can always scale more, can't you? And then I would say what first got me global was the translation deals in Life Leverage. And then
great book, by the way, Life Leverage. Awesome audio book.
Thank you. Very kind of you. And then, and then my podcast, because that's now got listeners in 204 countries or jurisdictions, because apparently there's only 190 something countries, but there's definitely 204 countries that have downloaded my podcast. And that probably started 5 years ago. So that would have been 9 years in. But I didn't really think about being global until probably 7 or 8 years in.
Yeah. I mean, it's an interesting shift, isn't it? Because you've gone from physical to global to online, and this is what a lot of people are doing in a very, very kind of rapid way right now, aren't they? I mean, a lot of people are having to pivot online, or they certainly feel they are. And for me, it seems like the pandemic has brought things along in so many ways that were going to take 5 years, and now they're taking a year or months, right? And looking just before we dive into kind of the strategy behind online global business, it'll be interesting to see how you guys have gone through the pandemic and what kind of pivots you've made or changes you've made, and what kind of shifts you've seen.
Yeah, so that's a similar story for us, actually, Sebastian. To be quite honest with you, business in the UK was probably not bad enough for me to want to accelerate my global growth quicker. So for at least 3 years, I wouldn't say before the pandemic, but maybe a year before the pandemic, I was thinking, do you know what? I think it would be wise for us to have at least 5 or 6 other countries. Scale, lack of hitting a ceiling in our market and saturation and maturation, which we've hit a bit in the UK. If UK economy suffers, maybe an economy on the other side of the world is doing good. There is the cycles in the economy probably oscillate at different points in different countries. So if you're in multiple countries, you can leverage almost arbitrage that. So there are many, and I want to have a global impact. I don't just want to impact my community or my county. I want to impact the globe with my mission to help as many people on this on this planet starting to get fuck.
We can try again. We can edit this out of the podcast.
No, don't edit it out. All right.
There's only 4,000 people watching.
Yeah. To help as many people on this planet start and scale their business and get a better financial education. That's my personal vision and mission statement.
But can you say it 3 times really fast?
Which I just fucked up. To help as many people on this planet start and scale their business and get a better financial education. To help as many people on this planet start and scale their business and get a better financial education. To help as many people on this planet start and scale their business and get a better financial education.
There you go. He's nailed it, guys. He's nailed it. Well done.
Yeah. So anyway, surreal moment there. I probably was too comfortable in the UK and the business was doing well enough for me to not have to push hard. So each year we would grow the UK. We'd have some years and then some sort of fairly static years, but we'd still make enough money. And, I didn't want to fly around the world because I've got young kids. Setting up an operation overseas, there's a lot that goes into that. So each year it would be in the goals, but I'd just not be motivated enough to really push it. And then lockdown happened and then bang, I went from spending 6 to 9 months usually to create a new product or a course or mastermind program. We were doing 1 a week. We created 12 new ones, good ones in 12 weeks, which are immediately globally scalable, downloadable and saleable. Much like you said, a lot of people have been forced to pivot themselves and to implement global growth much more quickly and, become an online business fast. We went through that transition. And actually, it was one of the best things that ever happened to our company for scalability, for de-risking. So, we went through that journey and we're probably 3 times as profitable on the same turnover now. So it's been good for us.
Do you know what? We've had about 60 to 70 interviews here. And a lot of them have been, interviewing people who have had inspiring pivots. And there's one theme there's a few different themes that have kind of been consistent throughout. And one of them is that so many people have seen their businesses develop and mature and become more profitable and lower overheads. And it's down to this shift. It's actually down to the pandemic, not in spite of it. Do you know what I mean? So a lot of people are kind of reaping the rewards from that by having the courage to kind of pivot and take their business into a new market, take their business online and to really push that. So I've definitely seen the kind of consistency with that. When you look at bringing a business from physical to online, and if you consider a lot of people may have traditional businesses, right? So shopkeepers, landlords, you name it, right? Traditional bricks and mortar, in your face businesses on the high street. What advice do you give people like that who are in that situation to becoming an online business and pivoting online?
I think there's probably 2 main models. Number one would be selling your products online. So essentially setting up an online store, Shopify, Amazon, becoming e-commerce. And then the second model would be selling your information. So what you've learned and what you know and what you've done and the experience you have, you convert that into books, podcasts, online courses, masterminds, mentorships, etc. They'd be the 2 main fast ways that you can pivot a local or bricks and mortar business into a globally scalable one.
Okay, brilliant. And I guess a huge part of it is having the confidence to do it, right? I mean, what do you say to a business that's kind of worried or scared about taking that risk and pushing forward to do it?
Well, number one, what are you scared of? Because I'd be quite scared of a 25-foot alligator. But what? Writing down some information about what I know? What are you scared of?
What are you worried about?
In a minute.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, the point being, where's that fear actually coming from? What imagination of things going wrong do you have, right?
Yeah, well, look, I know quite a few because, I've helped hundreds of thousands of people across the globe start and scale their business. So I'll come to some of those in a moment because actually each one's a bit different. What I would say, though, is, do you want to get left behind? Do you want your competitors to overtake you? Probably not. Do you want to risk not being able to pay all your overheads and your, quite high fixed costs? Do you want to get left behind as a business model in this sort of exponentially growing world of internet and technology? My guess is no to those things. But also remember this: every winner was once a beginner, and every master was once a disaster. So I wrote a book called Start Now, Get Perfect Later. Yeah. And that's what you should do. You start with where you're at. Let's say you're only a blue belt and you're not a black belt. So be the martial arts teacher that gets people at the beginner stage and gets them started. If let's say you've only got 10 buy-to-lets and not 100, well, be the training provider that gets people their first buy-to-let or their first 5 buy-to-lets. As long as you're ahead of someone in the game, you can always create a training, a consultancy, an information business, as long as the value's there and you can give people the outcome and the result. But yeah, in my book, Start Now, Get Perfect Later, and in my other book, I'm Worth More, I explore a lot the reasons why people don't put themselves out there more. They don't do lives on social media. They don't put content out there. They don't face the looming necessary changes to redirect their business. It's often through fear of failure. Well, I can tell you that every successful person is a failure many times over. No one is successful without failure. Every successful person you'll ever hear talk has had been riddled with failure. Stephen King got his books rejected so many times. I think it was it? But it was one of his very famous books, probably sold tens of millions of copies now. He actually threw the manuscript in the bin after one final rejection after loads of rejections. How many shots do all attacking sports people need to take to score goals? Well, they miss way more than they score. So this surprised someone, a friend of mine, struggling with something at the moment that she's dealing with. And I've been helping her, and I think she perceives that I've got my shit together. And I said to her, I have to experience failure and shame every day. And if I don't experience failure and shame every day, I'm not pushing enough. So just today, 2 people who I know very well, who I thought would speak at my Young Entrepreneurs Summit. They're very big names, very big celebrities. I know them well. And I thought that they would, come and do a slot for me, considering it's for charity. They said no. Normally my podcast is in the top 3, 5 at worst ranked in the business section. I looked this morning. I kept scrolling, couldn't find it. My downloads are down, way down than where they normally are. But 3 weeks ago, they were really high. You have to face rejection every single day if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. You cannot separate them. They are intrinsically linked together. So,
I guess it's hugely a part of just having a healthy relationship with risk, a healthy relationship with failure, and what failure really is. It's being a feedback mechanism rather than a judge of your character or a judge of who you are as a person, right? It's purely the road to discovering what it is you need to do.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, let's take my book there, Money. If that book sells 1 copy or 1 million copies, does 1 million sales of that book make it better? Well, the actual binary answer is no, because it's the same book. Now, of course, if the market likes it, that's obviously a barometer. But the point is, once that book's written, whether it sells 1 or 1,000,001 doesn't make the book any better. Whether my podcast's getting millions of downloads or tens of thousands of downloads, that isn't an indication of the quality of the podcast in and of itself. Is it good quality? So we have to be careful not to take personally our failures. And actually, we have to understand that we failed this time, not we are a failure. And that's a very different thing. Also, failure by what metric? Because my worst download day, 99.9% of podcasters, that's better than their best download day. But compare me to Joe Rogan, and his worst download day would be better than my best download day. But he's, probably in the top 5 podcasters in the world. So failure is comparison. And so be careful. What is it they say? That comparison is the thief of joy. So just know that you've got a good mission. Know that you're doing good work. Know that you're equally helping people as well as helping yourself. And, there's nothing to fear.
Brilliant. Yeah, I love that. I think that's so important, that kind of mindset shift. I'd love to kind of get into the strategy behind, launching an online digital business. Obviously, a big part of this is doing it with little to no overheads, right? And I know we've spoken about how it's very easy to keep costs low when you run an online business as opposed to doing it physically. For instance, your events you used to run in, or you probably still do, but a lot of it would have been in person in one location, which obviously needed paying for. Now you can host it online. There's lower overheads with that associated, right? But what is it that you can do to ensure that the strategy there is keeping the overheads low? And how important is community and developing a community to kind of help you with that?
Okay, so a way to keep a business overhead low is to leverage all the free media and social media that's out there first before you start spending heavy on ads. LinkedIn, Facebook groups, your Facebook page, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, have a podcast, have a YouTube channel, interview big name guests, be on other podcasts as a interviewee, a guest, etc. Because none of these cost any hard ad spend. So that's one way. The second way is to have a product or service that doesn't have overhead. So if you buy stock, you've got overhead, you've got money stuck in stock. If you've got physical premises or high fixed costs, staff, debt, then obviously that's a stress on your profit and loss. Whereas if you have an information-based business, consultancy, you're a coach, a trainer, a mentor, you run online courses, digital delivery, you use Zoom, Kajabi, GoToWebinar, etc. That's another way where you keep the overheads really low. The third way is to do collaborations. So instead of spending on advertising in whatever format, you could collaborate. So I could promote the Square Peg Round Holes show on the Disruptive Entrepreneur, and vice versa. You could promote the Disruptive Entrepreneur on Square Peg Round Holes. And if that went well, we could do that on our respective YouTube channels. And if that went well, we could do it on our respective Facebook groups. And we could help each other to grow each other together. And instead of paying each other money, we do a collaboration or a joint venture. So they're 3 immediate ways that you don't need any money for that. There's a time cost. There's always a cost. It's a cost to everything. But once you're sweating all of those, then you might consider running a physical event. We hire a venue, etc. after the lockdown, or putting some money into Facebook or YouTube ads. And I always recommend starting small and doing ongoing tests. Every post, every interview, everything I write, every video I do, I see as a test. And if it gets good response, I might continue down that road. If it doesn't get a good response, I might tweak it or bin it completely and try again.
Yeah, brilliant. I love the collaborations aspect. I think a lot of people have realized they don't need to be able to do everything, in their business. And a lot of the things I often say is, if you look at the pandemic, everyone was there with the perfect hand. They had their 5 cards, which they had been holding for a long time. And then suddenly there was so much disruption that the cards got knocked out of their hand. A lot of people are looking at the table trying to pick up the exact same cards. But the people I've seen who are collaborating the best are, they're looking at other people and seeing what other cards they've got and putting them together to create an awesome hand. And it's finding someone with a great product, or finding someone with great distribution, or finding someone who's got a great brand, and then just sticking it all together to create a good solution. Have you guys created any collaborations or partnerships during the last kind of 6 months where you've seen that in action?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in partnerships and collaborations. Were it not for that, I'd have to do all the delivery of the events we run. So before the lockdown, we did 850 training days, delivering, facilitating courses in the previous tax year. Our tax year is Jan to December. So that's 2.5 training days a day. I couldn't do all that. I couldn't even do one a day because, that's I don't believe in this hashtag no days off bollocks. So the only way for me to grow is to have partnerships where you could run an event with me. I fill the rooms online or face-to-face for you, and then you deliver your content. And if I've got 10 of you, then that's 10 days of training a day that I could facilitate in partnerships without me having to deliver it. And I love speaking and training. And I've had years where I've done 250 speaking days. Now, some people do 500 speaking gigs a year, but their talk's 30 to 60 minutes. Whereas when I did 250 training days, I was doing 8 to 10 hours a day. And I enjoyed it, but I really did burn myself out. I was actually really fatigued by the end of that year. So I realized it wasn't scalable, even though I loved it. So I was in this quandary. I'm loving what I do and I'm doing what I love. And that's surely, a great gift of life. And not many people can say that. But I'm also my own bottleneck and I'm restricting my own growth. So just recently I've partnered up. Well, I've known him for 15 years, but Jonathan J and I have partnered together. He buys businesses often with none of his own money. Rich Hawkins, who is big on e-commerce on Shopify and Amazon, we partner with him. I partner with Kevin McDonald in property. I could list 24 partnerships I have right now. And that also enables you to scale because you don't become the bottleneck anymore. Imagine I did 250 days and then I get really ill because I burn myself out and I need 2 months off. Well, for 2 months, we can do no business. But imagine if I have 10 partners and even half of them get COVID and have to isolate for 2 weeks, then you still got 5 training days a day that you can do.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's one of those things as well. It's more fun, I find. The partnerships I've created just made business more fun. If you try and do everything yourself and try and be alone and, own everything and be the lone kind of wolf with the whole thing, it's not as fun. And, you can get from A to B much faster by having the team in place, by having the partnerships in place, and you scale up quicker as well,
Yeah, I think the saying is, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And fast and far are really different. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs hustling like mad, working fast on their own, doing everything because, social media tells them to hustle and grind and 10x and whatever else. But actually, look, in reality, you probably have 30 good hours worth of work a week. In reality, maybe even only 20. When you consider the setting up, the task jumping, the actual effective working time before you start to diminish your results or fatigue. And even let's say you could do 50 really deep hours worth of work a week. But if you have 10 staff and they did 5 hours each, then that's 50 hours a day with 10 staff. So, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we are in the world of collaboration. Someone put it in the comments. I saw it pop through.
Yeah, let's see.
So many collaborations on Instagram, isn't there? And you can do a collaboration on a podcast, a collaboration episode where it's published on both podcasts. You could do a collaboration on YouTube. We are in the world of collaborations. We share each other's audiences. And I think it's a great way to grow. And it's a great way to grow on a low budget.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, if you've got any questions at all, feel free to fire them away and we'll bring them up. We've got one here from Sharon, just replying to your chat about the training days. How much prep did you do for the day's training? Because you said it was 250 training days a year?
Yeah, so it depends. In the early days, I was going on public speaking courses, reading public speaking books. I had a public speaking mentor. I would practice my talk over and over and over. I would drill it 5-10 times before I did it. And that got me to a certain level of proficiency. But then once it became more second nature and I could access a higher level of mastery through intuition and just having the information come through me, then I would stop and I would actually just like, for example, with this podcast and all the other podcasts, I intentionally don't want to see the questions because I want each interview to be different so that it's unique. I mean, I know one person who's done the same speech probably 5,000 times.
Wow.
And something you get with me is every single interview and every single speech is different. So I'm bringing it through the intuition of having done it. I've done thousands of speeches over the last, 15 years. So, things change and the way you prepare changes. Now, I might do some demographics or audience research. But yeah, I like to be in flow and to be natural and spontaneous.
Yeah, brilliant. In terms of this question here, do you think someone can rely primarily on the free social media and still reach a large audience?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I really do. Look, it's nice if you can put money into advertising. We probably spend £250,000 a month on advertising. I was reading my marketing reports this morning, and actually we spent 1,700 quid this week on 3 podcast ads, not as in, it's seen 3 times, but 3 ad campaigns on our podcast. And we spent $3,000 this week on 1 book campaign, and really didn't really get that good a return. So look, we can spend sometimes a few thousand quid and get a massive return. But I think people think the panacea is being able to grow your audience through ad spend. But you can just as easily waste your ad spend and burn it through diminishing law of returns. And when your staff are spending money that isn't theirs, they don't quite, care for that money as much as you would. So, there's an age-old joke in marketing: 50% of your marketing budget gets a return. You just don't know which 50%. So I see money being burned all over the place. In fact, I'd accept that 20% of our 20% of our 250 grand a month ad spend. So 50 grand a month, I'd expect that just to get burned and, wasted as test campaigns. But of course that leads to success. So don't be in a rush to go and spend a load of money on ads until you've exhausted all low cost and free media. But once you've done that, then you should start scaling up on your ads. But you can, for example, let's say you're in property. You could join my progressive property community with 33,500 members. You've got 33,500 captive people there. Now, you can't go in and spam the group, but you can build a brand and a reputation and people will come to you. So you can use Facebook groups. LinkedIn doesn't restrict your reach as long as the algorithm likes your content. And you could, I know someone who had 2,000 or 3,000 followers and he got 8 million views on one post. You'd never get that on any other social media channel. That would restrict your reach. Podcasting doesn't cost you anything other than, the small amount of setup cost and then a little bit of hosting. But of course you can, reach a global audience there. So yeah, absolutely. You can primarily rely on free and free social media. Absolutely. If you haven't got any money, what other choice do you have other than partnering someone with a load of money? So when I started business, 14, 15 years ago, you had to go around the country networking, collecting business cards, putting them into a CRM system. And you had to be spending a load of money on Google ads if you wanted to build any kind of reach. Now you can just do it on free social media groups. Yeah, I know that the world's different now. I don't think it's better. I think it's different. But social media has opened a whole new opportunity for marketing for sure.
I mean, a big part of this conversation is the strategy behind building a business, right? And keeping overheads low, keeping costs low. And it's completely easy to have an online business with super high overheads and super high costs if you're going straight into the advertising route. But I guess a big part of that strategy is really maximizing, organic and free channels.
Yeah. I mean, if you can increase your organic reach, if you can increase the amount of shares you've got, if you can join the relevant niche groups with thousands of members in, if I often go on social media and I'll make a comment on someone else's social media platform, Dan Bilzerian, Gary Vaynerchuk, Grant Cardone, Deepak Chopra, Dave Ramsey, big people who
Gary V. I see you giving Gary V a bit of a hard time these days.
I don't think it's a hard time. I think I'm misunderstood. I think I'm certainly not a troll. If you see some of the comments on my social media, you'll know what a troll is. Let me share you something. Someone private messaged me
No.
this week. There we go. 1 second. Let me find it.
We should do an episode on dealing with trolls and dealing with haters, really, because it's as people go online, they're going to see more and more of that. Do you know what I mean? Especially if you're running an online global business.
Yeah, I've done a lot of that content. If people listen to my podcast, The Disruptive Entrepreneur, I've done at least 5 episodes on that.
Really?
That's actually a big thing that stops people.
It's part of that fear, isn't it? It's part of that fear of stepping out and being seen.
Where is it? Don't say I've deleted it. It was just, I just thought it was quite sweet. Let me recently deleted. Let me find it. Don't know why I deleted it. 1 second.
So this is someone who just kind of trolled you online, is it?
Yeah. 1 second. I'll be a bit of a letdown now, won't it? Now that I am. Can never find anything when you need it. You can always find it. It doesn't matter, but yeah, every day.
When you really want a troll and they don't show up, right?
Yeah.
when you don't want them, they're always there.
Yeah. So as we were saying, I
what's your process for dealing with it? You know, for dealing with trolls. Just to wind that up. What's your process for dealing with it, and how do you approach it from a psychological angle? Because it puts a lot of people off.
I think you can ignore it. I think that's probably the best way to deal with it, because if something isn't in your awareness, it can't bother you, can it? So it's the cost of being successful. It's the cost of putting yourself out there. That, remember, nothing comes without a cost. Everything comes with a cost. So if the cost is up front, the reward is at the end. If the reward is at the front, the cost is usually at the end. So I know, as long as I'm doing good work, you've got to check that. And I know I'm helping people and I'm coming from the right space. I know that I accept along the way all the critics, the trolls and the haters that I get. You can have a bit of fun and banter with them. You can block them. You can ask them to expand and clarify what they mean and use it to hack the algorithms and get more reach. There's so many different ways of dealing with them. You can actually care for them and check to see if they're all right, because actually a lot of people who, blurt out vitriol towards you or hurt themselves and they're going through some pain, and you accidentally triggered them. So there's many ways to deal with them. But back to your initial point, because I don't like to leave questions unanswered. You said about I'm giving Gary Vee a hard time, and I mentioned 5 or 6 people. Sadhguru's another one. So when I follow people on social media, I try and comment on their work. So, I know some people just are a voyeur, but I like to get involved. And sometimes I will show appreciation, but often I'll create discussion. So people misunderstand my disagreement with someone as criticism or trolling, when in fact it's just creating a discussion. But actually I have gained tens of thousands of new subscribers by creating discussion on other influencers' comments and posts. So if your debates and your arguments and your information on social media is really good, you will gain big following over time.
Yeah, it's an interesting strategy. I've not heard of that one. Commenting on other people's stuff to create engagement and to create discussion, and maybe bringing over some alternative points of view. It's actually a really good idea.
Yeah. Well, look, the getting new followers is an upside consequence. I don't do it just for that. But if I'll give you an example. Someone put on their social media #NoDaysOff. And I just said, I'm not sure that's a good hashtag, because I think everyone needs some days off. And I bet you've had at least one day off. And there's a lot of prevailing sentiment around hustle and grind and 10x and having no days off. And that's how you're a successful entrepreneur. But what about the mental health connotations? What about the burnout? What about the lack of patience? What about the you don't handle yourself well because you're emotionally and physically drained? And what about the consequences of no days off? What about the lack of ideation and creativity because you're not having any days off? So that would be how I would engage with something where I think that there's an alternative point of view. If people misconstrue that as trolling, that's on them, not on me. But I actually
100%.
think that telling people to have no days off ever is bad advice. And it's my duty to call that out.
Yeah, absolutely. So calling things out, what would you say are the top 3 mistakes that people make when they transition from physical to online business? Because a lot of people watching this right now will be physical businesses. They're about to take their businesses online. A lot of people who will be listening to this podcast would love to do it. But what are the mistakes they should look out for? I know we touched on ad spend and maximizing organic channels. But what are the mistakes can people look out for?
Okay, I think one of them is not embracing it quick enough and waiting too long and holding on to the idea that your existing business model is okay and it will be okay. Yeah. Some people believe in a decade or two, retail will be completely dead. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but if there's a risk of that, then you need to be online. So it's making that transition more quickly, number one. Number two is it's putting yourself out there more. I don't think enough people put themselves out there enough. And I think that, you should have the start now, get perfect later approach to putting yourself out there. And try and put more content out there, get involved in more discussions and debates, do more video content, do more live videos, do more Ask Me Anythings. And the great gift about putting yourself out there more is not just the increase in volume. It's not just the increase in confidence. It's the iterative improvement. I fly a helicopter and they're really hard to fly. And you cannot improve flying a helicopter without getting in the helicopter and flying it. So you cannot improve your marketing, your message, your reach, your story until you embrace putting all of your content out there. You can't create perfect content. You have to go through loads of iterations. I loved Ed Sheeran's documentary. I watched it on Apple TV. And he said, look, if you want to write good songs, you've got to write a lot of shit songs first. And that was what one of his teachers taught him. And I just think that's brilliant. If you want to write good content, you've got to write a lot of shit content. If you want to write a great book, you've got to write a shit book. It's just that if you want to do great podcasts and great interviews, you've got to do a few shit ones. It's just the process of getting better. So I would say that would be the second mistake.
I mean that's second mistake. Really, it's all about being prolific, right? So many people just focus. They're such perfectionists that they kind of create extra stumbling blocks themselves to try and get over. Whereas person B, who's being prolific, has produced 6 or 7 different courses, 2 of which have really hit the ground running. The other 5 have failed. And person A is still trying to perfect that one course without testing the market first to see if it's really something people want.
Yeah. There's the saying, isn't there? Prolific is better than perfect. I agree with that. There's probably a balance. Because sometimes I think I did that too fast. I could have done a bit more research. So, and some things you do need to check. Like Grant Cardone is a friend of mine. He said, I'd never bother spell checking all my posts. I just stick them out there. People will tell me, speed. And I get that. But sometimes it is wise just to spell check something a second time or just check it. But just don't overdo it. But you learn on the go more than before the go. You have to do a load of social media posts before you work out what gets engagement. You have to write a few books before you find your voice. You have to do quite a few Facebook Lives before you get the lighting right and the ambient. That's a great example. Just start with a Facebook Live on your phone. Okay, the light's a bit shit. The audio's a bit shit, but it will teach you and lead you. And then you'll test a light and you'll test a podcast mic. And even in here, this is a new studio at home that I've built, and I still haven't got my proper podcast mic set up. And the lighting is better because I've got a light behind me, but it's not great. It's not perfect by any means. I've actually just had the room soundproofed, so the audio is probably a bit better than it was last week when it was echoey. But the point is, I can make this room better every week. I can make the tech and the equipment better every week by doing it on the go as you go. You asked me for 3. Again, I don't like to leave any questions unanswered. It's very difficult to say 3. But I would say business model is really important. A lot of people talk about mindset and stuff like that. But I think you've got to have the right business model. Is it scalable and leverageable online? Is it a business model that you really like? Like a lot of people say, oh, Rob, what's the quickest way to make, 100% return in a year, or, you know, £1 million or 100 grand. And actually the answer is, well, there's a load of ways to do that. And there's a load of ways to fail at that. So pick something you really enjoy. If you're going to create an information business, do it on something you're passionate about. You know, some people say to me things like, oh, well, Rob, you know, I haven't been doing my martial arts for 20 years, or I haven't been playing chess for 15 decades. Why are people going to listen to me? Well, if you love what you do, you've got a great podcast, because people love your passion, your energy, your enthusiasm. And also, if you have the humility to know that you're not the best in the world, but you want to improve, people also love that. So it's the iterative impact of passion. And then the final thing I'll say, I like to give 4 answers to a question where you ask me 3. And that is marketing. Too many people focus on the quality of the product, getting things perfect, you know, having all their ducks in a row. The single most important function of any business is marketing. If you have a shop, sales, which a lot of people say is important in business, which of course it is selling to people in the shop. But marketing is getting people in the shop in the first place. You have got to be as good at marketing as you are at product.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I find that a lot of business owners who are really successful, they tend to measure things that a lot of other business owners don't measure. When you look at your businesses, Progressive Property being one, do you guys measure the way in which, you know, a metric or something that determines success differently to other people?
Well,
is there some element of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of penis measuring going on in business, but I'm not sure.
in Progressive Property, or
no? So, yeah, I believe you cannot master what you do not measure. So whether that's the macros of your diet, so that you know that you're in a calorie deficit or surplus and you're getting the right macros in, or whether that's the return on ad spend, the cost per click, the cost per conversion, the cost per lead, the cost per sale, the lifetime client value, you cannot master what you do not measure. So yeah, I'm trying to measure as many metrics in my organization as possible without getting into diminishing law of returns of anality, where you're getting too micro. So yeah, I'm trying to measure everything all the way down the line. Average spend per customer, lifetime client value per customer, maximum acquisition cost of lead, maximum acquisition cost of lead per channel, return on ad spend as a percentage, return on customer spend as a percentage, number of purchases per average client, you know, average number of years a client is a client, average number of referrals each client gives, per head revenue on online and physical events. Yeah, just you cannot master what you do not measure.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Looking forward, Rob, to the next kind of 5 years, Progressive Property, Rob Moore, what's the plan? What's the vision that you guys have?
Well, I've taken a different direction to my companies. So I have to give you 2 answers to this, Sebastian.
Sure.
So with my companies, we're going to continue our global growth. We're running online and face-to-face seminars in hopefully 5 continents over the next 24 months, assuming no more lockdown repercussions. And then the same with my other training business, Progressive Success, which is business and public speaking and personal development. In terms of our brands, so we have many brands: the Disruptive Entrepreneur, my brand, Progressive Success, Progressive Property. We want to continue to grow them globally. I'm a bit of a sucker for starting new businesses. So actually, I've got enough business models, and I hopefully will not start too many new ones in the next 5 years, because you can do too much and you can spread yourself too thin. On a personal level, I've sort of semi-retired from my training companies. I've retired operationally. I'm still involved strategically. I still help with creativity and ideations, and I still do my own social media, which really is just a passion. I just enjoy doing this kind of stuff. But I'm spending more time with my family. I'm working more on my personal brand and trying to fulfill my personal mission, which is to help as many people on this planet start and scale their business and get a better financial education. And I'm running the Young Entrepreneur Summit on February the 6th in collaboration with the Prince's Trust. They just made me a board member. So I'm trying to do more philanthropic work and more work for my foundation as well. But really, it's more of the same. Sometimes people assume you've got to do something new. sometimes you're best just doing the same thing 20% better or 20% more.
It's like you said earlier in the talk, isn't it? If you're doing what you love, then that's a pretty amazing gift, isn't it? So if you're loving what you're doing, why would you make a massive change over the next 5 years, right?
Indeed.
Rob, cheers so much for coming on, mate. Really, really interesting conversation. Guys, if you just joined us, go back to the beginning, listen to this. It's going to be posted on all the groups and stuff, and find out more information about how to build an online business with little to no overheads. Rob, what's the best place for everyone to get in touch with you?
So my podcast is The Disruptive Entrepreneur. If you search my name, Rob Moore, on any social or search engine, you'll find my books. So maybe money might be where you start. And all the stuff I do, robmoore.com, for a bit more about me and my foundation.
Amazing. And in terms of collaborations, this is obviously being streamed to the F10X Academy group. Rob, where is the best place for these guys to is there a group they can join, or they can kind of engage with you more online?
Yeah. So I have a Facebook group called the Disruptive Entrepreneur Community, which is where my podcast listeners all frequent. There's about 19,400 of us in there. But you can follow me on Facebook, on my page, or on any social channel. Just search my name, Rob Moore, or Rob Moore Progressive.
Amazing stuff. Cool, mate. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will speak to you soon. Take care.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.